the small town of Maple Creek, hidden among the silent valleys and dense forests of the American countryside, lived a man named Ethan Walker. His life had followed the same rhythm for years, a slow, heavy, almost dragging rhythm, marked by the difficulties that had silently accumulated over time. The morning began like any other, with the soft sound of birds mixing with the wind that glided through the leaves of the trees. The sun was still shy, barely breaking the horizon, when Ethan sat in the old rocking chair on the porch of his small wooden house, staring into space, breathing deeply, trying to find in the silence a peace that never seemed to last long. His eyes wandered over the mountains in the distance, watching the mist that slowly dissipated, as if the day was waking up along with him, slowly, unhurriedly. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, bringing a brief comfort. The kind of comfort that lasts only a short time, but for a few minutes seems to soothe even the deepest worries. Ethan was 47 years old, and for at least 10 years, his life had been mired in debt, overdue bills, unfulfilled promises, and dreams that seemed to have been forgotten somewhere in time. He was never a lazy person. On the contrary, he always worked hard. For years, he tried to keep his small farm tool maintenance business alive, but the market was getting harder and harder. Customers were getting scarcer and scarcer, and little by little, his hope was fading, just like that morning mist. Sitting looking at the horizon, his mind filled with thoughts. Will life always be like this? Is there any way out for me? He took a deep breath, slowly, as if, with each breath, he wanted to release a little of the weight he was carrying on his chest. Bills were piling up on the old kitchen table. Piles of bills, collection notices, bank notifications, all piled up as if they were little daily reminders that life wasn't easy, and deep down, a silent sadness, that sadness that doesn't scream, that doesn't explode, but that stays there like a shadow, present, constant, cold. But even with all this, there was a resistance in him, an almost poetic stubbornness, to continue, to wake up every day, make his coffee, look at the horizon, and move on, because somehow, somewhere deep down, maybe there was still a small spark of hope, very small, almost imperceptible, but which, even so, never completely went out. This wind blew softly that morning, swaying the kitchen curtains, bringing that smell of damp earth, of living nature, as if life itself wanted somehow to whisper, "It's not over yet." And it was in this scenario, on this absolutely ordinary day, like any other, that something very discreetly began to change. As Ethan finished his coffee, he heard the muffled sound of footsteps approaching, light, rhythmic footsteps, accompanied by the familiar creak of the old wooden fence being opened. It was the postman, old George, who had been making that journey for over 20 years. George walked slowly, with that serene manner of someone who is in no hurry at all, holding a small bundle of letters in his hands. Ethan, curious, stood up, straightened his shirt, and walked, also slowly, to the fence. "Good morning, Ethan," George said with that calm, almost sleepy smile. "Good morning, George. What do we have for today?" "More bills, I imagine," Ethan replied, half joking, half resigned. George let out a short laugh, and then, almost automatically, he separated some envelopes, placed 3 of them in Ethan's hands, and among them was one different one. A thick envelope made of firm paper with gold edges and an old embossed seal, something you didn't see very often anymore. On the front, handwritten in elegant, well-drawn letters, Ethan's full name, Ethan James Walker. He held that envelope for a few seconds, looking, trying to understand, trying to remember if he expected anything. But no, absolutely nothing came to mind. "And this one is quite different," George commented, also looking curiously. It really is," Ethan replied, slowly running his fingers over the seal, feeling that strange, almost mysterious texture. George said goodbye, as he always did, with a slow wave and a calm smile. And Ethan stood there, standing, holding that envelope, staring, taking a deep breath, trying to process what that could possibly mean. He walked back to the porch, sat down, put the other mail aside, and stared at that piece of paper as if it held some kind of secret, some answer, some sign from the universe. For a moment, he thought about not opening it, about leaving it for later. Who knows? Maybe it wasn't even something important. Who knows? Maybe it was just some advertising or some mistake. But at the same time, there was a restlessness, a silent curiosity that began to grow, very slowly, almost like a small wave that was forming on the horizon, and little by little getting closer. With slow, careful movements, his fingers slid across the seal, and with an almost imperceptible snap, the seal broke. He opened the envelope, pulled out a thick sheet of yellowed paper with elegant, drawn, almost artistic writing, and then he began to read, slowly, each word, each line. With each sentence, his eyes widened, his breathing slowed, as if everything around him was, little by little, slowing down, as if time, suddenly, had decided to move more slowly. The letter began like this: "Dear Mr. Ethan James Walker, it is with great respect and enormous responsibility that we contact you. We deeply regret to inform you of the recent passing of your distant relative, Mr. Arthur William Walker." Ethan stopped, blinked slowly. His mind tried to search. Arthur William Walker. The name didn't sound familiar at all, but he continued reading, slowly, almost hypnotized. Mr. Arthur Walker had no direct heirs. After extensive genealogical research, we have confirmed that you are the closest living relative. Therefore, according to the legal and testamentary provisions, you are the sole beneficiary of his entire inheritance. heart raced, but at the same time, it seemed to slow down, as if this was all part of a dream. Assets include properties, investments, invested assets, and material goods, totaling. And as he read that number, Ethan had to take a deep breath, a really deep breath, close his eyes for a second, as if it were too big to fit within his own reality. The letter continued, detailing the steps, the lawyer's contacts, the necessary documents, all with an impressive formality, and at the same time, surreal. For a few minutes, Ethan stood there, standing, staring at the paper, breathing slowly, trying to understand, trying to accept. This can't be real, he thought. This doesn't happen to people like me, to people who live like me. The wind blew, softly, swaying the leaves, as if the universe itself wanted at that moment to whisper in your ear, your life will never be the same again. Ethan stood there, motionless, holding that piece of paper that from one moment to the next seemed to weigh more than anything he had ever held in his life. The wind swayed the trees slowly, measuredly, as if even nature understood that that moment needed to be absorbed, slowly, without any rush. He reread the letter, once, twice, 3 times. Each word seemed more surreal than the last, and yet each time he read it, it became a little more real, more tangible, more possible. Arthur William Walker, he repeated in his mind, trying to search through his memories. Any memory, any childhood conversation, any mention of that name, but nothing, absolutely nothing. The last name was the same, of course, Walker. A large, scattered family with long-standing stories he'd never bothered to follow up on. Maybe, who knows, one of those distant relatives you only hear about once in a lifetime. Or maybe not even that, and then, almost without realizing it, a feeling began to arise within him, a mixture of disbelief, shock, and little by little, a timid, almost imperceptible hope. He put his hand to his chest, feeling his own heart beating, not accelerated, not desperately, but curiously, in a rhythmic, constant way, as if his own essence was adjusting, slowly, to the new scenario that so unexpectedly was beginning to take shape. He got up, went to the kitchen, put more water on to boil, and as he heard the soft sound of the kettle starting to hiss, he stood still, looking out the window, observing the world outside, which curiously looked exactly the same. The trees were in the same place. The birds flew the same way. The clouds glided across the sky with that almost poetic slowness, and yet everything was different. As the coffee slowly brewed, drops falling one by one, Ethan noticed something curious. For the first time in many years, his shoulders, which seemed to carry the weight of the world, were slightly, just slightly, looser. He sat down again, took a deep breath, looked at the envelope, at the letter, at that piece piece of paper that seemed to contain not only words, but possibilities, new paths, new lives. Next to the letter, he noticed another, smaller piece of paper that had gone unnoticed at first. He picked it up carefully and read it. It was an elegant card with classic typography. Senior Ethan James Walker, please contact our office as soon as possible to follow up on the legal matters relating to Mr. Arthur William Walker's estate. We will be at your disposal for any questions or clarifications. Yours sincerely, Walker and Green. Law firm below a phone number, an email, and the address of a building located in San Francisco, California. Ethan let out a long sigh, almost as if he was trying, with that breath, to release all the weight of doubt, uncertainty, fear, and who knows, leave space for something new, something good, something that, until that moment, seemed reserved only for others. Never for him. He picked up the landline phone, that old device he hardly used anymore, and slowly turned the numbers, listening to each click, each sound, as if that, in itself, was part of some ritual, of some silent transition between one life and another. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, until on the other end a soft, professional voice answered. Walker and Green office, good morning. Who do I speak to? For a second, Ethan had to take a deep breath, collect his thoughts, as if reality itself was still rearranging itself within him. Good morning. This is Ethan Walker. I received a letter talking about an inheritance. His voice came out lower than he imagined, almost like a whisper. Mr. Walker, yes, we've been waiting for you to contact us. One moment, please. There was the sound of keys being pressed, papers being handled, and then the same voice came back, this time even more welcoming, more gentle. Perfect, Mr. Walker. Yes, you are the direct heir of Mr. Arthur William Walker. We understand that all of this may be a big surprise, and that is why we are here to assist you throughout the process. Ethan remained silent for a few seconds, absorbing every word, every syllable. Right, but I don't even know who he is, he replied with that raw, honest sincerity that comes from someone who never expected anything beyond the daily struggle. On the other end of the line, a faint smile could be felt, even if invisible. This is more common than you might think, Mr. Walker. Mr. Arthur spent much of his life traveling, away from most of his family. According to our records, he had no children, no direct siblings, and no close nephews or nieces. His family tree indicated that you are his closest living relative, albeit quite distantly, but legally you are his direct heir. Ethan took a deep breath, slowly, trying to digest each piece of information. And I'm sorry to ask, but is it really a great inheritance? Her voice came out trembling, mixed between disbelief and a hint of hope. Yes, Mr. Walker, it is a considerable estate. We have property records, financial investments, works of art, as well as a house on the California coast, valued at several $1,000,000. All of this is now under your care. The silence that followed was so absolute that Ethan could clearly hear the sound of his own heart, beating slowly, rhythmically, as if his own existence was being there, completely redesigned. Our team has already prepared all the necessary documents. You can come to our office whenever you want. We can even arrange your travel, accommodation, transportation, everything to make the process easier. Ethan brought his hand to his forehead, massaging it slowly, trying somehow to wake up from that dream, or perhaps to accept that for the first time in his life, the dream was real. Okay, I need some time, just some time to understand this, he replied, his voice choked, almost hoarse. Of course, Mr. Walker, we are at your disposal. When you are ready, just let us know. And once again, our condolences on the loss of Mr. Arthur, and our congratulations on the new chapter that is beginning in your life. The call ended. Ethan remained for a few minutes, staring into space, breathing, slowly, deeply, slowly. The world outside remained exactly the same. The wind was blowing. The leaves danced softly. The sound of birds continued. But inside him, absolutely everything had changed. Slowly, he stood up, walked to the porch, sat back down in the old rocking chair, looked out at the horizon, and for the first time in many years, let out a smile. Not a wide, open smile, but that serene, peaceful smile of someone who, deep down in their soul, realizes that maybe, just maybe, life still has very good things in store. Things that until then seemed to exist only in dreams. The day went on, and although everything seemed on the outside exactly as it always had, inside Ethan, every second now felt different, lighter, stranger, more full of possibilities that he didn't even know how to process yet. Sitting in the rocking chair, he watched the horizon for long minutes. The soft sound of the wind rustling the leaves seemed to have a different tone now, almost as if nature itself, which had always been his silent companion, was celebrating with him. Calmly, discreetly, without fanfare, without haste, Ethan's mind, however, seemed to work in slow motion. His thoughts came, went, came back, disappeared, like gentle waves that touch the sand and recede and return and disappear. Could it be true? Could it be some mistake? Could it be? Could it be? He thought as his eyes scanned that horizon that for so many years had been synonymous with routine, with stagnation, and that now seemed finally to open invisible doors. He got up slowly, walked to the kitchen, opened the old drawer in the cupboard where he kept all the documents, bills, papers, and memories of his entire life. He began to rummage through the papers as if somehow he could find a clue there, anything that would confirm the existence of this Arthur William Walker. There were old photos, yellowed papers, birth certificates, letters from distant relatives, memories of a past that until then he had rarely revisited. He picked up an old photograph where his parents appeared still young in front of the old family home decades ago. He looked closely, looking for faces, details, someone who could, in some way, be that Arthur. But nothing. He took a deep breath once more, and as he slowly closed the drawer, he realized that perhaps not all the answers came from there. Maybe some answers simply didn't need to be discovered. Maybe the most important thing was to accept that sometimes life simply surprises, without explanation, without logic, without warning. He returned to the balcony where the envelope still lay on the table. He looked at it as if looking at a half-open door, a door that for his entire life had seemed locked, and that now was there, just waiting for him to gather up the courage and go through. He picked up the phone again, dialed another number, this time of his old friend Tom, one of the few who had stayed by his side, even in the most difficult times. The phone rang once, twice, until Tom's deep, drawling voice answered. "Ethan, boy, what a surprise. Is everything okay over there?" Ethan smiled, that serene smile, which still looked strange on his own face. "Tom, you won't believe what happened. Seriously. Even if I told you, you wouldn't believe it." On the other side, Tom gave a short laugh. "You know that, coming from you. Anything is possible. Send it on. What's wrong?" Ethan took a deep breath, and then, in a calmer voice than he had imagined, he began to tell every detail, from the arrival of the mailman, to the reading of the letter, to the call to the law firm. On the other side, the silence grew, until Tom, completely at a loss for words, blurted out, "Man, this is surreal. It's like something out of a movie, Ethan. Like something out of a movie, man. I know. I also don't know if I'm dreaming, if it's a joke, if I don't know," he replied, shaking his head, looking at the horizon again. For a few seconds, they both remained silent, that comfortable silence, that silence that only exists between true friends, friends who understand that sometimes words are unnecessary. "And what are you going to do now?" Tom asked, curious, but at the same time, careful. Ethan stood there thinking, looking at the envelope, at the office card, at the mountains in the distance, and with a slight sigh, he replied, "I think I'll go to San Francisco. I need to see this with my own eyes. I need to know if this is real." Tom agreed on the other end of the line. "It's good. And look, if anything happens, call me. Seriously, you're not alone in this, man." Ethan smiled again, that serene smile, half in disbelief, half moved, and after thanking him, he ended the call. He stayed there for a few more minutes, just observing, feeling, breathing, as if every little part of that moment needed to be carefully absorbed, imprinted in memory, recorded in the soul. The sun was now beginning to move slowly across the sky. casting long shadows, gilding the leaves, gently warming the wood of the porch. And in that warm, almost cozy warmth, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, a silent peace, discreet, shy, but real. He got up, walked to the bedroom, opened the old closet, and began to sort out some clothes. He took the dusty suitcase that he hadn't used for years, dusted it off, opened the zipper, which creaked, protesting against the time it had been forgotten. He carefully put on some shirts, pants, socks, like someone preparing not just for a trip, but a transition, a rite of passage. At the bottom of the suitcase, he found an old photo of him, still young, with his parents during a trip they had taken many years ago. He picked up the photo, looked at it, smiled, and without thinking much, put it in the pocket of the suitcase. Maybe they were watching over me. Who knows? Maybe they're smiling now. He closed the suitcase, and for a few seconds, he stared at it, there, on the bed, as if that suitcase was now a symbol, a portal, a key. He walked to the kitchen, picked up the phone again, and dialed the number for Walker and Green. On the other end, the same calm, professional voice answered. Walker and Green, good morning. Who am I speaking to? This is Ethan Walker. I'm ready. Can you tell me how to get to you? The voice on the other end seemed to smile. That smile you feel, even when you can't see it. Perfect, Mr. Walker. Get ready. Your new life is about to begin. The next day, Ethan woke up before the sun even rose. But this time, it wasn't out of worry or anxiety. It was out of a different kind of excitement. A gentle mix of hope, fear, curiosity, and an almost childlike feeling that, for the first time in a long, long time, life had prepared a good surprise. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he spent a few minutes just observing the closed suitcase in the corner of the room, that object that, until then, seemed like just another forgotten piece of the past, now transformed into a silent symbol that everything was about to change. The soft sound of birds began to fill the air, like a peaceful soundtrack accompanying that different dawn, almost magical, almost poetic. He got up, went to the kitchen, put water on to boil, and while he waited, he looked out the window. The fog danced slowly over the distant fields, creating a scene that looked like a painting, one of those paintings that you can look at for hours without getting tired. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the house, that familiar, comforting smell. But this time, it didn't carry the weight of worry. On the contrary, it felt like a gentle invitation now, a warm embrace, a reminder that no matter what happened, everything would be okay. As he drank his coffee, he picked up the envelope again. He ran his fingers over the thick paper, feeling every relief, every texture, as if that could somehow help him understand that yes, this was real. A few hours later, at exactly 9 in the morning, the phone rang. It was was from the firm of Walker and Green. "Mr. Walker, good morning. Is everything okay with your trip?" asked the gentle voice on the other end of the line. "Yes, it is. I just need to know how exactly this is going to happen. I've never done anything like this before," Ethan replied with that honesty that came naturally, without filters. "Perfectly, Mr. Walker. We have already arranged everything. A car will pick you up at your residence in an hour. It will take you to the Portland airport. From there, we have a flight booked to San Francisco. As soon as you land, another driver will be waiting. We will take care of absolutely everything." Ethan took a deep breath. The kind of breath that carries not just air, but also a mixture of fear, hope, and acceptance. "Okay, then. See you soon. See you soon, Mr. Walker. And once again, congratulations." The call ended, and for a few seconds, Ethan remained there, holding the phone, staring into space, as if at that exact moment, its mind was trying to convince itself, for the 1,000th time, that all of this was, yes, real. He stood up, took a deep breath, picked up his suitcase, and before leaving, he walked to the balcony. For a few seconds, he looked at that horizon that he knew so well, that horizon that for years was synonymous with limitations, difficulties, and postponed dreams. But now, that same horizon seemed somehow different. It seemed more open, more full of possibilities, more full of life. He closed the front door, locked it, looked at the house, at that simple home that for so many years was his refuge, his shelter, and even in the midst of all the difficulties, his place of rest, of peace, of silence. And as he descended the 3 steps of the porch, he heard in the distance the sound of a car engine approaching, slowly, almost as if that sound was part of the soundtrack that life, mysteriously, was composing for that day. The car pulled up, a black sedan gleaming in the soft morning light. The driver got out, opened the door, and with a polite smile, greeted, "Mr. Ethan Walker, nice to meet you. I'm David. I'll be accompanying you to the airport." Ethan smiled, nodded in agreement, and with a long sigh, put the suitcase in the trunk. The door closed, and as the car began to pull away from the small dirt road that led to his house, Ethan looked out the window, observing every inch of that path that for so many years had been part of his routine. The trees, the fields, the old fences, every detail now seemed charged with a sweet melancholy, a silent but necessary farewell. The car continued, crossing small roads, passing through villages, until finally arriving at the airport. The process at the airport was surprisingly easy. Everything was already paid for, organized, and planned. All you had to do was present your name, and the attendants, with that trained corporate smile, immediately began to treat you like someone special. "Ticket to San Francisco. Mr. Walker, here you are. Your seat is in first class. Have a great flight." First class, he thought, almost laughing. Never in his entire life had he even imagined that he would hear that phrase being said to him. place a few minutes later, and as soon as he settled into his seat, he realized that, yes, it was all real. The plane took off, and as it rose through the clouds, making Little Maple Creek smaller and smaller, Ethan felt for the first time that something inside him, something very deep, was finally breaking free. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and in the comfortable silence of that flight, he let himself relax. He let himself, for the first time, believe that maybe, just maybe, life sometimes really does surprise. And as he watched through the window, the clouds dancing slowly in the sky, a phrase echoed softly inside his mind, almost like a whisper, almost like a mantra. Your life will never be the same again. The flight was smooth, and as the plane glided silently through the clouds, Ethan looked out the window, almost hypnotized by the immensity of that blue sky, cut here and there by wisps of white, soft, light clouds, as if the sky itself was gently welcoming this new chapter of his life. It was strange to think that until yesterday, his reality was different. A reality full of debts, unpaid bills, uncertainties, and sleepless nights. And now, there he was, sitting in a soft airplane seat, with a glass of juice served by a smiling flight attendant, being called sir at every interaction. For a few moments, he closed his eyes. He let his mind get lost in that slow, measured, almost meditative rhythm. The constant sound of the engines, the subtle rocking of the aircraft, all of it seemed to work as a sort of lullaby for adults, bringing a calm he hadn't experienced in a long time. Is this really real? He thought, letting the thought slowly dissipate, like smoke, like mist, like everything that little by little loses strength and simply disappears. When the commander announced the start of the descent, Ethan opened his eyes, took a deep breath, looked out the window again, and saw down below the perfect layout of the city of San Francisco. Its buildings, its bridges, its streets, full of life. This is where it all begins, he thought with a discreet, almost embarrassed smile. The landing was smooth, peaceful, and as soon as he left the aircraft, he walked slowly through the terminal, pulling his suitcase, observing every detail of that place so different from what he was used to. Right at the exit, he saw a man holding an elegant sign, which read, in well-drawn letters, Sister Ethan Walker. He walked up to him, and before he could say anything, he was greeted with a polite smile and a professional greeting. Mr. Walker, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Charles, a driver for the firm of Walker and Green. I've been assigned to escort you to our office. Your car is right there. Ethan thanked him with a shy nod, and together they walked to a sleek black car that was waiting parked in the airport's VIP area. During the journey, Charles maintained a polite but discreet conversation. Ethan, on the other hand, preferred to observe rather than speak. The streets of San Francisco glided past the window, the famous hills, houses, the cable cars, the people hurriedly walking by. Each scene seemed at once strange and fascinating. It was like he was watching a movie where for the first time he was the main character. Cars stopped in front of an imposing building with classical architecture, with large marble columns at the entrance and glass doors that shone in the soft light of the late morning. "We're here, Mr. Walker," Charles announced, getting out of the car and opening the door for him. Ethan got off, straightened his shirt, took a deep breath, and for a few seconds he just stared at that building, like someone looking at a door that for his entire life seemed inaccessible, and that now was wide open, just waiting for him to go through. They walked up the steps, and as soon as the doors opened, they were greeted by a smiling receptionist wearing an elegant blue suit. "Good morning, Mr. Walker. We have been waiting for you. Please come with me." They walked down a wide hallway where huge paintings decorated the walls, portraits of old families, framed documents, black and white photographs from distant times. Each step echoed lightly on the marble floor, and that sound, soft, rhythmic, seemed to mark, in an almost symbolic way, the transition between one life and another. The receptionist stopped in front of a dark wooden double door with gold handles, and with a kind smile said, "They are waiting for you." He pushed open the door, and on the other side, a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a spectacular view of the Golden Gate Bridge opened before Ethan. Behind a huge, polished wooden desk sat two men. One of them, with gray hair and a light gray suit, stood up immediately and held out his hand. "Mr. Ethan Walker, we finally meet. I am Richard Green, senior partner of the firm, and this is my colleague Michael Foster, probate and inheritance specialist. Please come in, make yourself comfortable." Ethan shook both of their hands with that half-suspicious, half-shy way, and sat down in the indicated chair, facing them. Richard smiled. That confident smile of someone who has done this dozens, hundreds of times, and opening a leather folder, he placed several organized documents on the table, all aligned to the millimeter. "Mr. Walker, first of all, allow me to express our condolences on the passing of Mr. Arthur William Walker. Although you did not know him personally, he left very clear instructions regarding his succession." Ethan just nodded, not knowing exactly what to say. Richard continued. "Mr. Arthur was, let's say, an extremely private man. He spent the last 30 years away from most of his family, dedicating himself to investments, works of art, and philanthropy. With no direct heirs, he chose, and made sure to leave this on record, that his inheritance would go to the closest relative found through genealogical research. Michael, who had been watching until then, opened another document and, in a calm tone of voice, added, "And Mr. Walker, after months of research, we came across you." Ethan took a deep breath, clasped his hands in his lap, and almost in a whisper asked, And exactly what does that mean?" Richard smiled, adjusting his glasses. It means, Mr. Walker, that as of today, you are the sole legal heir to an estate valued at... He pulled out a piece of paper, looked at it briefly, and said calmly, almost as if talking about the weather, $27,485,000 in liquid assets, not counting properties, stocks, real estate investments, works of art, and a residence valued at over $7 million. For a few seconds, time simply stopped. Ethan couldn't react. He stared at that number, at those words, trying somehow to understand, process, accept that this was real. The sound of the wind outside, the distant noise of cars, everything seemed to fade away, disappear, as if the entire world had held its breath, waiting for him to process that information. He took a deep breath, put his hand on his chest, closed his eyes for a few seconds, and when he opened them, he realized that, yes, that was, without a shadow of a doubt, the first day of a completely new life. The silence that filled the room felt almost sacred, a thick, soft, comfortable silence, like that silence we sometimes feel when we wake up in the middle of the night, when everything outside is absolutely quiet, and only the sound of our own breathing fills the space. Ethan stood there, frozen in time, staring at the documents on the table. $27 million. $27 million. That number seemed surreal, almost impossible, almost beyond the comprehension of someone who, until yesterday, didn't even know how he would pay next week's bills. He took a deep breath, very deep, letting the air slowly enter his lungs, filling his body, his mind, his soul, and as he let it out, some of the weight, that invisible weight he had carried for so many years, seemed for the first time to dissolve, gently, silently, like snow melting under the morning sun. Richard and Michael remained silent, respecting that moment. They knew more than anyone that this was the kind of news that cannot be delivered just any old way, that requires time, space, acceptance. After a few minutes, that felt like hours, Ethan finally broke the silence. I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. Her voice came out low, almost a whisper. Richard smiled, that kind, professional smile, but at the same time human, empathetic, welcoming. Don't worry, Mr. Walker. This is completely normal. Believe me, you're not the first, and you won't be the last, to be left speechless by something like this. Michael, in his calm tone of voice, added, our job here is to help you understand all of this. From now on, you are no longer alone. We will guide you through each step in a calm, organized, and safe way. Ethan took another deep breath, looked out the window, where the sun was slowly beginning to set on the horizon, dyeing the sky a soft gold, almost poetic, almost cinematic. For a few seconds, he let his eyes wander over that view. The bridge, the sea, the buildings, boats gliding slowly across the bay, and he thought to himself, maybe, just maybe, life still knows how to surprise in the most beautiful and unexpected way possible. Turning his attention back to the table, he asked, "And what do I need to do now? How does this all work?" Richard adjusted his glasses, pulled out a notepad, and with that tone of someone who has done this hundreds of times, began to explain slowly, with all the clarity in the world. You basically have two options. You can take on all the management of the assets yourself, which will involve managing real estate, investments, financial assets, properties, and all the responsibilities that come with that. He paused briefly, looking into Ethan's eyes, and continued. Or you can choose to delegate this to a specialized administrator who will take care of everything for you while you decide how you want to live, what you want to do, what direction you want to give your new life. Ethan shook his head slowly, taking in every word, every detail, trying to understand little by little what it all really meant. Michael opened a side folder, took out some photos, plans, and documents, and placed them on the table. This is the main residence that was part of Mr. Arthur's estate, located in Sausalito in the San Francisco Bay Area. A waterfront home with 5 bedrooms, heated pool, movie theater, office, library, and a view that is simply indescribable. Ethan picked up one of the photos, looked at it, and for a few seconds he just stared. That house, that place, that piece of the world seemed like something out of a dream or a movie. Impeccable gardens, huge windows, a balcony with a direct view of the sea, where the sunset painted the sky with colors he never imagined existed. He let his fingers slide slowly over the photo, as if somehow he wanted to touch, feel, believe that it, in fact, was his. Richard continued. In addition to the residence, you inherited 3 commercial properties in San Francisco, 2 luxury rental apartments in the downtown area, a wine farm in Napa Valley, and of course, a diversified investment portfolio in addition to funds, stocks, and long-term investments. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and realized that his entire body now felt lighter, as if, with each new piece of information, life was slowly dissolving the weight he had carried for so long. When he opened his eyes again, he looked at the 2 lawyers, and with that shy smile, but now full of something new, something he hadn't felt for a long time, he said, I think I just want peace. I just want to live without rushing, without fear, without that weight on my chest, you know. Richard smiled and replied with a slight tilt of his head, "Mr. Walker, from today, you can do all of this and much more," Michael added with a calm smile. "Our job is to make sure that from now on, your life is exactly the way you want it to be." Ethan was silent for a few more minutes, just watching, feeling, letting each little part of that new reality fall into place, slowly inside his mind, inside his soul. Outside, the sun continued its slow descent, painting the sky orange, gold, pink, as if the universe at that exact moment was creating a work of art just for him, and for the first time in a long, long time, Ethan realized that, yes, life was finally smiling at him. After long conversations, explanations, documents presented, and clarifications, Richard calmly stood up, arranged the papers in the leather folder, and with a gentle smile said, "Mr. Walker, I know this can all be a little overwhelming at first, and so we recommend that you take some time, visit your new residence, breathe, adjust, and when you feel comfortable, we can move on to the next steps." Ethan, who until then had just been absorbing everything in silence, took a deep breath, looking out the huge window that overlooked the San Francisco Bay, where the sun's rays were already beginning to dye the sky with that golden hue of late afternoon. The idea of visiting his new home still seemed somewhat surreal, a phrase that until yesterday he would never have imagined hearing directed at himself. "Okay, I guess that makes sense," he replied, his tone calm but still filled with sweet disbelief. Richard smiled, pressed a button on the phone on the desk, and within seconds the door opened again. The elegant receptionist, with that same welcoming smile, walked in and handed Ethan a black envelope sealed with gold wax. "Here are the keys to the Sausalito residence, Mr. Walker, along with a map showing the location and some useful contacts. A driver will take you there now, if you wish." Ethan took that envelope, feeling the texture of the golden wax under his fingers, and for a few seconds he just looked at it, breathing slowly, deeply, as if he understood deep down in his soul that small object symbolized, in fact, the beginning of a new life. "Yes, I want to go there," he replied with a shy smile, almost as if he still didn't believe what he was saying. Richard and Michael stood up, shook his hand firmly, and Richard concluded, "Welcome to your new world, Mr. Walker. And remember, anything, absolutely anything, we are just a phone call away." Ethan thanked him, and accompanied by the receptionist, walked down the silent corridor with slow steps, as if he didn't want that moment to end, as if he wanted to absorb every detail, every sound, every smell, every color. When he arrived at the entrance to the building, there was the same black sedan, now with a different driver, a middle-aged man with gray hair who opened the door with a friendly smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Walker. I'm Henry. I'll be driving you to your residence in Sausalito." Ethan nodded, put his suitcase in the trunk, and settled into the back seat. The car glided smoothly through the streets of San Francisco, crossing bridges, crossing hills, until finally taking the road that skirted the coast, offering a simply breathtaking view of the Pacific Ocean. The smell of the sea, mixed with the wind that gently entered through the crack in the window, seemed to bring with it a peace that Ethan Ethan felt as if he was literally leaving his old life behind and slowly, gently approaching a future that until then seemed to belong only to dreams. After about 40 minutes, Henry slowed down, turned onto a road lined with tall trees, and at the end of it, the iron gates opened automatically, and then there it was, at home. No, it wasn't just a house. It was a work of art. An elegant building with modern lines, large glass walls, wide balconies, and impeccable gardens that stretched until they almost touched the sea. In the background, the soft sound of waves breaking on the rocks, the salty smell of the ocean breeze filling the air, and that sunset that seemed hand-painted, dyeing the sky gold, orange, and pink. The car stopped smoothly in front of the entrance. Henry got out, opened the door, picked up the suitcase, and with a discreet gesture said, "Mr. Walker, your house." Ethan went downstairs, and for a few minutes he just stood there, standing, looking, breathing, trying to understand, trying to believe, trying to accept that this was, in fact, real. He slowly climbed the 3 steps that led to the front door. He took the key, fitted it into the lock, turned it, and with a soft click, the door opened. The smell of new wood, mixed with the subtle scent of fresh flowers, filled his senses immediately. He came in. The polished wooden floor reflected the last rays of sunlight that entered through the huge windows. The main room had very high ceilings, white sofas, soft rugs, shelves full of books, and at the back, an entire wall of glass that looked directly out onto the ocean. He walked slowly, observing every detail, every piece of furniture, every painting, every object that was now part of his life. To the right, a wooden staircase led to the second floor, where the bedrooms were. On the left, a spacious kitchen with white marble countertops, modern appliances, and a central island that looked like something out of a TV show. And beyond the kitchen, a sliding glass door opened onto a massive balcony with outdoor couches, a stone fireplace, and an infinity pool that seemed to merge directly with the ocean. He walked to the balcony, stopped there, and for a few minutes, he just looked at the sea, listening to the sound of the waves, feeling the wind on his face, and allowing that moment, that reality, that new world, to simply embrace him. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. It's real, he thought. It's real, and it's mine. And for the first time in many, many years, he felt something he no longer remembered what it was like. Peace. A peace so deep, so sweet, so welcoming, that it seemed to fill not only the body, but the entire soul. There, in that moment, Ethan understood, deep down inside, that sometimes, yes, life surprises, and when you least expect it, absolutely everything can change. Ethan stood there, standing on the porch, for long minutes, maybe half an hour, maybe an hour, maybe more. Time in that moment seemed to have lost lost all importance. The sound of the ocean filled everything. That constant, hypnotic melody of the waves gently crashing against the rocks. The smell of the sea. The cool wind gliding over your skin. Everything felt perfect. He took a deep breath, slowly, as if each breath was, little by little, washing his chest, cleaning his worries, undoing layer by layer all those years of weight, tiredness, and sadness that he carried. I don't need to run anymore. I don't need to fight against time, or against the world, or against myself, he thought as he observed the horizon, where the sky began to fill with stars, one by one, blinking slowly as if the universe itself was smiling at him. The silence, broken only by the sound of the sea, seemed more comfortable, more welcoming than any words. It was a silence that embraced, that cradled, that calmed, and in that silence, Ethan realized that for the first time in decades, he didn't have to worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow, he thought with a calm smile, tomorrow can wait. For the first time, it can wait. He walked slowly into the house. The automatic lights turned on softly, filling the rooms with a warm, comfortable light that seemed to embrace the spaces, without dazzling, without attacking, just welcoming. He explored each room with slow steps, without any rush. The master bedroom, with a huge bed covered in soft, white, impeccably lined sheets, a private balcony with a direct view of the ocean, comfortable armchairs, a fireplace, and on the small table next to the bed, a small handwritten note. Welcome, Mr. Walker. May this home bring peace, rest, and new beginnings. He held that note, gently ran his fingers over the handwriting, and for a few seconds he closed his eyes, allowing that simple and yet so profound message to fill his heart. New beginnings, he repeated mentally. That's exactly it. A new beginning. He went to the bathroom. White marble, a whirlpool tub, fluffy towels. Everything was perfectly organized. Turned on the faucet and let the tub fill slowly, listening to the sound of the water falling, mixing with the sound of the waves outside, creating a perfect symphony of peace. While the tub was filling, he went back to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator, which was stocked with fresh fruit, juices, cheeses, breads, everything carefully prepared for his arrival. He took a glass, poured some juice, and with the glass in his hands, walked back to the balcony. The sky, now completely dark, was covered in stars, thousands, millions, dotting that immense, deep, infinite sky. He sat down on the lounge chair, crossed his legs, rested the glass on his chest, and looking at that silent spectacle, let his mind wander. Calm, free, light. What am I going to do with my life now? He thought. But unlike all the other times he had asked this question throughout his life, this time it was not accompanied by fear, nor anguish, nor despair. It was just a curiosity, an open window, a blank path, whatever I want. Literally, whatever I want, he smiled. took a sip of the juice. He closed his eyes. He let the wind play with his hair. He let the smell of the sea, the sound of the waves, the freshness of the night fill every little bit of his being, and then he realized that more than money, more than property, more than any material possession, what life had given him was time, freedom, peace, silence, things that, deep down, are the most valuable of all. He opened his eyes, looked at the stars again, and almost as if he were talking to the universe itself, he whispered, "Thanks." He stayed there. He didn't know for how long. Just staying, present, whole, at peace. When sleep began to take over his body, he walked slowly to his room. He turned off the lights, left the curtains open, and lay down on the huge, comfortable, soft bed. From there, lying down, he could still see the starry sky, and in the background, the constant sound of the sea, lulling his thoughts, his breathing, his entire body. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long, long time, he fell asleep smiling, and he fell asleep in peace. Waking up that morning was an experience completely unlike any other in Ethan's life. For the first time, it wasn't the insistent sound of an alarm clock that pulled him from sleep, nor the anxiety about overdue bills, nor the crushing weight of routine. What woke him up gently was the sound of the waves breaking rhythmically below, the distant song of the seagulls, and the golden sunlight which slowly entered through the window, sliding over the white sheets, warming his skin, waking him up so sweetly, so peacefully, that he didn't even open his eyes right away. He stayed there, lying for long minutes, just breathing, taking a deep breath of that fresh air, mixed with the scent of the sea, of wood, of peace. I felt my own body, relaxed, loose, without tension, and in my mind there was no longer that constant whirlwind of worries. There was space, silence, lightness. Is this what it's like to wake up without worries? He thought, smiling, his eyes still closed. When he finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the blue of the sky, that deep, clean blue that seemed infinite. He stretched slowly, like someone who is in no hurry, like someone who knows that time now is working in his favor. He got up, walked to the bedroom balcony, and stood there, watching the sea, the waves, the boats crossing in the distance, and the sun, which was already beginning to rise, spreading its golden light over everything. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time, he realized something simple, yet profoundly powerful. He was free, debt-free, free from crushing obligations, free from fears, free from the constant feeling of running, always running, never getting anywhere. There, at that very moment, his life was his, entirely his. He walked to the kitchen. He made some coffee, cut some fruit, grabbed a piece of bread. Everything at his own pace. No rush, no investments, instructions, contacts. For a few minutes, he flipped through it, but realized that he didn't need to dive into it right away. For the first time, he could allow himself to simply live. All of this can wait. Today, I just want to exist, he thought, smiling. After coffee, he walked to the garden, his bare feet touching the cool grass, feeling each step, each texture, as if he rediscovered in that simple act the pleasure of simply walking. When he reached the edge of the land, where the grass met the glass fence that separated the property from the cliff, he watched the waves, the constant back and forth, hypnotic, perfect, and there, as he watched, his mind began for the first time to think not of what he needed to do to survive, but of what he could do, simply because he wanted to. What do I really like? What gives me pleasure? What makes me smile besides this here? Besides this silence, this peace, this sea? He asked himself as the wind ruffled his hair and the sun gently warmed his face. And slowly, almost as if he didn't realize, he realized that all of that wasn't just about money. It never was. It was about freedom. Freedom to choose. Of waking up and deciding what your day would be like. Of walking without a destination. Reading a book just because. To cook something new. To learn something new. To simply exist. For years, maybe decades, your life was defined by what you needed to do. Now, for the first time, it was about what he wanted to do. He smiled. That serene, light, almost childlike smile. That kind of smile that appears when we realize that somehow, even without understanding how, the universe, life, God, or whatever name you want to give it, hasn't forgotten about us. And as he watched the sea, he felt within him a certainty arise, slowly, gently, but absolutely clear. Life has given me a new chance, a second chance, and I will honor that. I will live, not just exist, but live. For real. He took a deep breath, looked at the horizon once more, and then walked slowly back into the house. He took a notebook, one of those simple, hardcover ones that he had found on the shelf in his office, and sitting at the table in his living room, he opened it to the first page and wrote at the top, "Things I want to do with my new life." And below, he began to list, no rush, no fear, no limitations. Learn to cook dishes I've always dreamed of. Travel, see the world, see the sea from other places, helping people, making a difference in someone's life. Have a dog, a really big one. Learn to sail. Plant a garden with flowers, with herbs, with life. Learn to play the guitar. Seeing the sunrise in places I never imagined. Being. Write a book about life, about myself, about what I've learned, and above all, never forget to be grateful. Never again. When he finished the list, he looked at her, and for a few seconds, he just smiled. It's just the beginning, he thought. Just the beginning. And with that light, sweet, almost magical certainty, he got up, walked to the balcony, looked again at that infinite sea, and for the first time in his life, he felt that everything, absolutely everything, was possible. The day went on, slowly, smoothly, exactly as it should. Ethan sat on the porch, watching the waves come and go, holding the notebook open on his lap. He looked at each item on the list he had written, and with each reading, he felt a mixture of surprise and delight. It's funny how, when life gives you space, you start to remember your own dreams, he thought, smiling to himself as his eyes wandered over the horizon, where the blue of the sea blended with the blue of the sky. For many years, her days were filled not with choices, but with obligations. Waking up early, chasing bills, dealing with delays, broken promises, hopes that wore out like old fabric, and now that old trail of worry had been replaced by something new, by silence, by time, by peace. He walked to the kitchen. He grabbed a mug of coffee, and as he waited for the hot liquid to slowly fill the mug, his eyes scanned the details of that place that, although still so new, was already beginning to feel like home. I want to start with something simple, something that makes me feel present, that brings me joy, lightness, he thought. He opened the notebook that was on the counter and, guided almost by a childish impulse, typed in the search engine, "Where to adopt dogs in Sausalito." The screen filled with results, photos of dogs of all types, sizes, looks, some happy, others scared, some with that look that seems to carry centuries of stories. And then his eyes stopped on a specific photo. A golden retriever, a little older, slightly gray snout, sweet, deep eyes, the kind that just by looking at them, you feel that there is a gentle, serene soul there who just wants a home. He thought with an immediate smile. It's him. You clicked on the link, quickly filled out the form, and a few minutes later you received a confirmation email. "Hello, Mr. Walker. We're glad you're interested in adopting Charlie. We can schedule a viewing today if you'd like." Without thinking twice, he replied, "Yes, today, as soon as possible." He closed his notebook, finished his coffee, picked up the keys to the car in the garage, an elegant sedan that was part of the inheritance already registered in his name, and guided by the GPS, he drove slowly through the quiet streets of Sausalito until he reached the shelter. The place was simple but well kept. Gardens, trees, wide spaces, and right at the entrance, a woman with a wide smile, tied up hair, and a welcoming look welcomed him. "Mr. Walker, I'm so glad you could come. I'm Emma, the shelter manager. Charlie is in the back. Come, I think he'd really like to meet you." They walked together to a fenced area where several dogs were playing, running, and in the corner, lying in the shade, was him, Charlie. Upon seeing him, Ethan immediately felt a strange connection, strong, as if in some way he couldn't explain. They had known each other for a long time. Emma opened the gate and called, "Charlie, come here, darling. Someone really wants to meet you." The dog slowly stood up, walked towards them, wagging his tail, and as soon as he got close to Ethan, without any ceremony, he sat down right in front of him and just stared. That look, deep, serene, almost human, and before he knew it, Ethan was crouched down, running his hand over the soft fur, feeling that warmth, that life, that companionship that sometimes arises in silence, in touch, in simply being together. Charlie rested her head on his leg, and at that very moment, there was no longer any doubt. It was as if, since forever, one had been waiting for the other. Emma smiled, crossed her arms, and said, almost jokingly, "Well, I don't think I need to ask if you liked him." Ethan laughed. That light, spontaneous laugh, full of truth. "He's not just a dog. He's part of what I didn't even know I was looking for." The process was quick. Signatures, instructions, a few documents, and an hour later, Charlie was in the back seat of the car, looking out the window with that curious, attentive look as Ethan drove back home. On the way, Ethan thought, "Funny, we think we choose, but deep down, they're the ones who choose us." Right? They arrived home. Charlie, as soon as he got out of the car, ran through the garden, sniffing every corner, wagging his tail as if he were recognizing his new home there. Ethan opened the door to the house, and for the first time since he arrived, that space, which before was just beautiful, elegant, now had soul. It smelled of life, of company, of love. Charlie ran to the balcony, looked at the sea, looked at Ethan, and as if to say, "This is where we live now," he lay down on the carpet, stretched out his paws, and closed his eyes, breathing deeply, as if he knew that he had finally arrived home. Ethan sat down beside him, stroked his soft head, looked out at the horizon again, and with that serene, peaceful smile, he thought to himself, "Yeah, I think, for the first time, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The sea continued with its constant ebb and flow. The wind blew softly. The sky was beginning to fill with stars again, and in that house, in that piece of the world, two souls who until then had been lost, finally had found each other. The days that followed were so sweetly simple, so light, that Ethan sometimes found himself looking at the horizon and wondering if all of that was really real. His routine was now made up of small rituals that he didn't even know he needed. He woke up to the soft sound of the waves, made himself coffee, went for a walk along the beach, always accompanied by Charlie, who seemed happier every day. The mornings were slow, lazy, full of pauses, of deep breaths, of long looks at the sea, at the sky, at the little things. Life was never about running. It was never about achieving. It was always about being, he thought more and more, as his feet sank into the wet sand at the edge of the beach. Charlie would run ahead, stop, look back, wag his tail, as if to say, "Come on, hurry up, look how big the world is." And in that simplicity, Ethan realized that for the first time, he was truly living. After the walk, he would return home. He would prepare a hearty cup of coffee, fruit, eggs, toasted bread, and often he would find himself putting on some calm music, letting the sound fill the spaces, lulling his thoughts. And while he ate, he looked at that notebook he had started days before. The list. That list. What do I do now? I thought, smiling as I looked through each item. And then, with that impulse that now seemed easier to hear, that impulse from his own soul, he picked up the notebook, pulled out a pen, and circled one of the items, "Learn to sail." He got up, opened his notebook, and typed in the search engine, "Sailing lessons in Sausalito." To his surprise, or perhaps not so much surprise, the city was full of sailing clubs, schools, instructors, all offering courses from the most basic to the most advanced. He chose one, guided more by instinct than anything else. He filled out the form, and in less than 20 minutes, he received a call. On the other end of the line, a calm, relaxed male voice. "Ethan, hello. This is James from the Sausalito Sailing Club. We received your inquiry. Are you interested in learning to sail?" "Yes, very much. I've always dreamed about it. I think now I can," he replied, almost laughing, half not believing he was really saying that. James smiled. You could tell by his tone. "Perfect, man. We're starting a new class tomorrow. If you want, you can come and check it out. No obligation. We're sure you'll love it. Tomorrow. It's perfect. I'll be there." He hung up. He stared at the phone for a few seconds. He took a deep breath, and once again, he smiled. That's it. That's how it begins. One day at a time. One choice at a time. In the afternoon, he decided to take a walk around the city. He put Charlie in the car and drove slowly through the quiet streets, discovering cafes, bookstores, little shops, places that, until then, only existed in those films he watched to distract himself from the worries of his old life. He stopped at a bookstore, one of those charming ones, with wooden shelves, the smell of old books, low lighting, where every corner seems to invite you to stay, to get lost, to let yourself go. Charlie politely lay in the doorway, watching the movement, wagging his tail at whoever passed by. Ethan walked through the aisles, running his fingers along the spines of books, reading titles, smiling at small discoveries. On one of the shelves, he found a book called The Sea and Life, a collection of stories, chronicles, and reflections from sailors who left everything to live on the ocean. He picked up the book, opened it randomly to a page, and as if on cue, the first sentence he read said, "Life, like the sea, does not wait. It is always motion. Whoever learns to sail does not just learn to steer a boat. He also learns to steer his own soul, he smiled. He closed the book. He took it to the cashier. On the way home, the wind blew his hair. The smell of the sea filled the car, and Charlie in the back seat looked out the window, tongue out, tail wagging, as if he understood that life, somehow, had also changed. For him, arriving home, he left his shoes at the door, walked to the porch with the book in his hands, sat down, pulled a blanket over him, and stayed there, reading until the sun began, once again, its slow descent, dyeing the sky with that golden orange that now was part of his new routine. And as he read, as he felt the wind, as he listened to the sea, a certainty formed within him. Life hadn't just given him money, she had given him back himself, and that was priceless. The next day dawned as serene as the previous ones, with that constant sound of the waves breaking, the smell of the sea coming gently through the open window, and the soft song of the seagulls which danced in the blue sky. Ethan woke up without an alarm clock, without obligations, without a weight on his chest. He just woke up. He took a deep breath, and for a few seconds he stared at the snowy ceiling, listening only to his own breathing, accompanied by the sound of the wind outside. Beside the bed, Charlie was already lying down, watching him, as if he knew that day would be special, different, one of those days that we carry in our memories forever. He got up, took a long shower, made a simple coffee, picked up his backpack, and after patting Charlie on the top of the head, said, "Today is the day to start, my friend. Wait for me, okay? I'll be back soon." Charlie wagged his tail as if he understood perfectly. The path to the Sausalito Sailing Club was short. A road lined with trees, with the sea always present on the left, silently following along, as if observing everything from afar, but making a point of being there, witnessing it. When he arrived, he realized that the place was even more beautiful than he had imagined. Boats anchored and swaying gently, white sails, masts that tinkled in the wind, and that wonderful smell of wood, salt, and freedom. As soon as he parked, he saw a man wearing a cap, unshaven and smiling broadly, waving from afar. "You can only be Ethan. Did I get it right?" he said, walking towards him. Ethan smiled, shaking his hand. "It's me, yes, and you must be James. Perfect. Welcome to the club, my friend. Ready to learn how to master the wind?" Ethan laughed, shaking his head, half shy, half excited. "To be quite honest, I don't even know if I'm ready, but I'm here." James patted him on the back. "That's all you need. The rest, the sea will teach you." They walked along the pier together, while James explained the basics. He pointed out the boats, the sails, talked about the winds, the knots, the currents, and Ethan absorbed it all, like a child seeing the world for the first time. "Here, we don't control the wind, Ethan. Here, we learn to use the wind to our advantage. Life is more or less like that too, you know. said James, looking at the horizon with that look of someone who carries much more than words. Ethan just nodded, looking out to sea, feeling once again that silent truth that lives in simple things. Soon the other students began to arrive. 4 people, 2 men, a woman, and a lady with white hair, a big smile, and an energy that immediately made Ethan smile just by looking at them. "I'm Margaret," she said, holding out her hand firmly. 72 years old. I've always dreamed of sailing, and now, here I am. It's never too late, my dear. Ethan shook his hand, laughing. I realize I'm in great company. James gathered everyone together, explained what the day would be like, and before long they were all on one of the training boats, gliding slowly through the calm waters of the bay. The wind blew gently, and as James taught commands, maneuvers, directions, Ethan realized that there was, in that act of sailing, a hidden poetry. It was about observing, about feeling, about understanding that you don't fight the wind. You learn to dance with it. And as he held the rope, feeling the sail fill and the boat respond, tilt, glide, a deep sense of freedom ran through his entire body. That's it. That's what I came for, he thought, smiling, with the wind messing up his hair and the smell of the sea filling everything. The class went by quickly, much faster than I had imagined. And when James announced that they were returning to the pier, everyone laughed, almost in a lamenting tone. Already? But it's just started, Margaret said, crossing her arms, pretending to be angry, but smiling. James laughed. The sea is like that. When you realize it has already stolen your time. Back at the dock, everyone got off the boat, agreeing to meet the next day for the next class. Ethan thanked James, who responded with a wide smile. It's in your blood, Ethan. You were born for this. We just need to remember who we are. On the way home, driving slowly down the road, with the windows open, the sound of the wind, the smell of the sea, he realized that, once again, that day had given him something much greater than knowledge. It had given him belonging. When he got home, Charlie came running over, as usual, wagging his tail, jumping around him, as if to say, "So, how was it? Tell me all about it." Ethan crouched down, hugged that warm, soft body, and laughing said, "It was amazing, my friend. Amazing. And you know what? We're just getting started." Together, they walked to the balcony. They sat there, as they did every day, and just watched the sea. The sun began its slow descent, dyeing everything golden. The wind was blowing. The waves were breaking, and in that silence full of meaning, Ethan realized once again that life, when you least expect it, gives you exactly what you didn't even know you needed. In the days that followed, Ethan immersed himself completely in this new world. The mornings began to take on a new rhythm, no longer rushed, no longer filled with worries, but instead driven by a perfect blend of curiosity, learning, and peace. wake up early, drink his coffee to the sound of the waves, and as if it were a ritual that had been going on for decades, he would walk to the beach with Charlie. The dog would run, play, get covered in sand, and then lie down, panting in the shade, while Ethan simply watched. I watched the sky, the sea, the coming and going of the waves, the seagulls dancing in the wind, and in silence he thanked. Every day the sailing lessons became more natural. The hands, which had previously trembled when holding the ropes, now acted confidently, almost automatically. The body understood more and more how to position itself, how to feel the wind, how to understand the signals of the sea. James, the instructor, laughed and said, "See, Ethan, I told you you were born for this, my friend. This right here is your soul remembering who it always was." And Ethan believed it. He felt it in every fiber of his body. Sailing wasn't just about steering a boat. It was, in fact, a living, breathing, perfect metaphor about life. Not controlling, but learn to dance with what you can't control. In those moments, in the middle of the sea, with the wind pushing the sails, with the boat gliding over the water, Ethan felt a freedom so deep, so real, that it seemed, in fact, that he was living for the first time. How many things I failed to do. How many times life tried to show me that there was more, and I couldn't see it, he thought, as he looked at the infinite horizon, where the blue of the sky and the sea met in a line that seemed to have no end. When he wasn't sailing, Ethan began exploring other parts of this new universe that was opening up. I visited wineries, went on trails, discovered small hidden restaurants, charming cafes, and little shops with handicrafts that told stories just by looking at them. He started talking more to people, to the shop owners, to the fishermen on the pier, to other sailors at the club. And he realized that the best stories, the best lessons, were not in books, nor on social media, nor in the news. They were there in the eyes of those who live, in the speech of those who feel, in the silence of those who have learned. One morning, sitting on a bench on the pier, watching the boats rock gently, he noticed a lady with white hair tied in a bun, selling small wooden sculptures. He approached, he looked. Each piece was unique. Fish, boats, seagulls, lighthouses. He picked up a sculpture of a sailboat, small, delicate, but full of details, and holding it in his hands, he asked, "Who does it?" She smiled, that smile full of wrinkles, of stories, of time. "Yes, I've been doing it for over 40 years. I started when I lost my husband. He was a fisherman. He made these little boats in his spare time. When he passed away, I continued." Ethan held that boat even more carefully. "They are beautiful. They have soul. You can feel it." She nodded, looking out to sea. Everything we do with our hands takes pieces of our soul with it. Whoever buys it takes a piece of us, and whoever feels it gives us a piece back too. That's how the world goes, my dear. For a few seconds, Ethan was silent, just feeling those words settle inside him. He bought the little boat, thanked them, and as he walked back home, he realized that this object was not just a decorative piece. It was a symbol, an anchor, a constant reminder that he was now part of the sea. Arriving home, he placed the boat on the shelf in the living room, facing the window that overlooked the ocean. Looked, breathed, smiled, and in that simplicity, he realized that sometimes the most valuable things in life are priceless. They are made of time, of presence, of encounters, of connections. Charlie, lying on the carpet, watched everything as he always did, with that look that seemed to understand more than any human ever would. And as the day wore on, Ethan knew, deep in his soul, that this life, this peace, this gift he had been given, was not a reward for what he had done in the past. It was an invitation from life, saying silently, enjoy, live, feel, because the best is yet to come. Time in that new life seemed to have a rhythm of its own, a rhythm that no longer obeyed the hands of the clock, but rather the tides, the rising and setting of the sun, the coming and going of the waves, the sound of the wind blowing in the sails. It was as if each day was built by itself, naturally, like a gentle song that doesn't need to be rushed, pressured, or obligated to exist. Ethan adapted little by little to this new rhythm. Mornings were walking along the beach with Charlie, drinking coffee without rushing, watching the sea, listening to the silence. That silence full of subtle sounds that only those who really slow down are able to hear. Then I went to the sailing club. Classes no longer felt like classes. They were encounters, experiences, moments where each maneuver, each breath of wind, each adjustment to the sail taught much more about life than any book would ever be able to. James, his instructor, noticed this, and one afternoon while they were sailing together, he said, "You see, Ethan, that sailing isn't just about steering a boat, right? Ultimately, it's about steering yourself. The boat will only go if the one holding the helm understands that it's not about fighting the wind, it's about dancing with it." Ethan just smiled, looking at the horizon where the sky kissed the sea, and replied almost in a whisper, "I think, for the first time in my life, I understand that." That same night, lying in the hammock on the porch, looking at the absurdly starry sky, Ethan reflected on everything that had happened. Letter envelope, about inheritance, about how overnight his life took such a huge, absurd turn that even today, sometimes, it still seems like a dream. But looking at the sky, at that silent and brilliant infinity, he realized that, in fact, this was not just luck. It was not just chance. It was a second chance. A rare, almost magical opportunity that few in life receive, and with it came a responsibility. What am I going to do with this? Besides living well, besides taking care of myself, besides seeking my happiness, what can I do for the world, for people? She thought as she felt the wind gently play with her hair. at Charlie, lying beside him, sleeping deeply, breathing slowly, calmly, his chest rising and falling in time with the sea outside. And he smiled, I think. It's time to think about how to give back some of what I received. The next morning, he woke up with a determination. He picked up his notebook, opened it, and began researching. He looked for information about animal shelters, social projects, organizations that looked after the environment, ocean preservation, education for underprivileged children. Every click, every website, every story he read filled his chest, not with heaviness, but with a new kind of energy, of purpose. What if I create something that isn't just mine, but that stays, that remains, that helps, that transforms? He thought as his hands typed, almost without realizing it, as if his own soul was guiding every movement. And so, without planning too much, without sketching too much, an idea was born, a foundation, a project, a legacy. It would be called Winds of Hope, an organization dedicated to offering experiences at sea to children and teenagers in vulnerable situations. The idea was simple and at the same time immensely powerful. Take these children to the sea, teach how to sail, teach about the ocean, about the wind, about the stars, about life. Show them that just like at sea, in life you can't control the wind, but you can learn to adjust the sails. Show that even when everything seems lost, even when life seems hopeless, sometimes the horizon is there, waiting, just waiting for someone to have the courage to look at it. And the more he wrote, the more he planned, the more he mentally sketched out every detail, the more Ethan realized that this was it. That was what his soul had been trying to tell him, silently, since the day that letter arrived. This isn't just for you, Ethan. This is meant to be shared. He called Richard, the lawyer, and explained his idea. On the other end of the line, a pause, and then that calm and wise tone, as always, answered, Mr. Walker, that is absolutely brilliant, and if I may say so, absolutely beautiful. We can get started right away. The legal creation of a foundation is simple. What you are proposing is something that will certainly make more of a difference in the world than you can imagine. He hung up the call. He took a deep breath. He looked at the horizon. The sea was calm. The sky was clear. The sound of the waves seemed softer now, sweeter, as if somehow he himself approved of that decision. Charlie, as always, was lying beside her, watching, breathing, present, and in that moment, Ethan realized once again that life sometimes gives you much more than you ask for, and that the best thing you can do is give back. The days that followed were filled with a new kind of energy, an energy that no longer came from fear, rushing, or the need to survive, but rather from purpose. As the sun followed its cycle of rising and setting, Ethan filled his days with something that went far beyond simply enjoying his new life. Now he was building something that would actually make sense, was quickly taking shape. With the help of Richard and his team, the documents were formalized, the name registered, and the bylaws drafted. At the same time, Ethan began talking to the people at the sailing club. When he presented the idea to James, the sailing instructor, he received a big hug, a big smile, and a response that has stuck in his memory. Man, this is exactly what the world needs, and you can count on me, on my boat, on my time, on my life, if need be. And it wasn't long before other instructors, sailors, fishermen, and even boat owners joined the project. It seemed like that idea touched something very deep in people, something that made perfect sense, something that deep down everyone always wanted to do, but never had the opportunity or the courage to start. Soon, an old shed on the pier was renovated. They painted the walls, fixed the roofs, put up new signs. That place, which was once just another forgotten warehouse, now became the Foundation's headquarters. On the door, a simple sign made of light wood with letters engraved in navy blue read, "Winds of Hope." Here, you learn that you can't control the wind, but you can learn to adjust the sails. And on the first day of operation, Ethan stood at the door, watching the children arrive. Many had never even seen the sea up close, despite living in a coastal city. Others looked at the boats with a look that mixes curiosity and distrust, as if they don't know if it's real, if it's for them, if they belong there. But all it took was for the first sail to open. All it took was for the first boat to glide. All it took was for the first breath of wind to push that small group across the water, for something inside to change. It changed in their eyes, changed in smiles. It changed into screams of surprise, of joy, of enchantment, and it changed too inside Ethan. Seeing those children who once carried the weight of the world in their eyes, discovering that, yes, they could steer a boat, they could feel the wind, they could look at the horizon and understand that, just like at sea, in life, they could also choose their path. It was indescribable. Every laugh, every enchanted look, each hand held for the first time a sail, a rope, a rudder, every wow that echoed over the waters. It was a small proof that, yes, it all made sense. Ethan often found himself getting emotional standing on the pier, looking at those boats, at those white sails filling with wind, at those little sailors who now understood that life could be much more than what they had known until then. Charlie, as always, was nearby, lying in the shade, watching everything, with that serene, wise look, as if he understood perfectly what was happening. The project grew. More volunteers arrived. More boats were donated. Local businesses began to support. And little by little, Winds of Hope became not just a foundation, but a movement. Ethan, in his quiet hours, on his balcony facing the sea, reflected, who would have thought that it would all start with a letter, a simple letter, and to think that for so long I thought life had forgotten about me. He looked at the horizon, where the sun was slowly beginning to set, painting the sky with that gold that he never tired of admiring. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and in the most absolute silence of his soul, he whispered to himself, "Thank you. Thank you for this second chance. Thank you for not letting me give up, even when I thought everything was lost." When he opened his eyes, he saw white sails dancing in the wind. He saw the children smiling, driving their own boats. He saw the sea, infinite, eternal, serene. And at that moment, he had an absolute, unquestionable, unshakable certainty. Life, when you least expect it, changes, and sometimes